Imagine what your life would look like if you stopped accepting the barriers placed in front of you. Welcome to Limitless Living with Purpose and Joy, the podcast dedicated to discovering the alternatives. Each week, we tackle the 3 hurdles of limitations that get in our way: the external pressures of society, the internal noise of self-doubt, and the physical challenges that try to slow us down. Together, we will uncover the solutions to help us live our best lives. And now, your host, Trace Kingham.
Welcome to Limitless Living with Purpose and Joy. I'm Trace Kingham, and today we are talking about stepping into the unknown. A limitless life, requires courage, and it requires looking fear right in the face and jumping in anyways. So my guest today is someone who's done just that, jumping into the unknown since she was in high school. Arianna Nassiri is a government relations director at the American Red Cross. By the time she was a senior in high school, think about that, a senior in high school, she was already serving as San Francisco Youth Commissioner and standing next to Speaker Nancy Pelosi on national television. Arianna, welcome to the show. We're so excited to have you.
Thanks for having me. So happy to be here.
Well, before we jump into your incredible story, I want to ask this question that I ask every guest right out of the gate. If you could give our listeners one piece of immediate limitless wisdom, one specific thought shift they can use right on the second that fear is facing them, or that imposter syndrome that we have, stopping them from going for what they want, what would it be? What advice would you give them?
Oh, that's a great question right out of the gate. I think, at least just based on my experience, the piece of advice that's really kind of broken down any sort of barrier that I would have had to deal with was, and you're gonna have to hear me out for this, is kind of take the instruction rule book that you've been handed and kind of throw it out the window, in the sense that, you know, there's the cliche rules are meant to be broken. I don't necessarily agree with that, but I do think that using the kind of SOP and the status quo for who should be doing what kind of job and who should be in what rooms, that's never going to change anything, especially
Mm-hmm.
if the people who are currently in those rooms are not producing the solutions we want to see. So if there's a problem that you want to be contributing to, insert yourself into that discourse. And the worst case scenario is you get hit with a no and that door doesn't open. And then you're back to exactly where you were beforehand. But 9 out of 10 times, at least in my experience, that door was just waiting for someone to come and open it. So I really think that not comparing yourself to the kinds of people that you've seen in those rooms and just realizing that you have the capability to be a part of that solution is really a key switch to flip to be a part of the discourse that you want to be a part of.
So open the door, insert yourself. I love that. And then really look at yourself as the unique individual that you are and the things that you can bring to the table, and not get, like you say, hyper focused on what you see outside and other individuals that might be in that role or what you perceive to be that role.
Absolutely. Yep.
Yeah, perfect. Okay, so now let's get to your story, because it's a great story. So I'd love for you to talk a little bit about, your age, how old you were, how you landed into that role in the commissioner's office, and really talking a little bit about, you know, your story. Let's start there.
Sure, absolutely. And you'll have to cut me off because this is a decades long story, but I'm currently 23 years old and my career in civic service began a little over a decade ago. So if you do the math and work backwards, I was 12 years old and my first role involved in
Wow.
public service. I'll tell the short version of the story, and it's that I come from a family of scientists for the most part. My mother's a biologist, my grandfather's a chemist, my father was in computer science, and I fully thought that my road was going to be becoming the next Carl Sagan or Neil deGrasse Tyson. I thought astrophysics was so cool. It was where I had focused most of my energy in school, in elementary and up to middle school. I had done the space camps and all the opportunities that someone of that age would have to engage with science extracurricularly. And I grew up with a mother who was a big advocate of having difficult conversations and adult level conversations with her daughter. So I grew up in San Francisco, which is a key part of the story. San Francisco is, in my opinion, the best city in the world, but obviously any major metro city deals with its fair share of civics related policy issues, the homelessness, the drug addiction, the housing crisis, and San Francisco is not immune to that by any means. And growing up, we drive through our neighborhood, which was relatively clean and safe, and you're able to walk around at night. And then we drive into other parts of the city that were not in such a position, right? It was a lot more precarious to walk around at night. It wasn't as family friendly. You could see the drug epidemic in the streets. You could see the issue with folks who were unhoused. And once I got to an age where I started seeing that discrepancy and understanding that this is a person who doesn't have a home to go to at night, I started asking questions of,
Mm.
how did that person end up that way? How is it that we have a home and they don't, right? What decisions did they make? Is it their fault? Is it the system's fault? What's going on? And it got to a point where my mother, having a background in science, wasn't able to answer all of my questions. She knew that the tip of the iceberg that everyone knows, but then it got to a point where she said, Ariana, I don't have an answer for you for this. You're going to have to turn to an expert, like a housing expert or a homelessness expert. And I found those issues kind of keeping me up at night, where I'd go to school and I'd look at my school lunch and I think, oh gosh, those people at the soup kitchen that my mom and I volunteer at, they don't get a school lunch. And all my friends are complaining about their sandwiches, but
Mhm.
those people would kill to have a sandwich right now made for them. So I I realized that as much as I enjoyed the space and the astrophysics, I thought it was so romantic and cool, that the thing that I found myself compelled really to try and get involved with, and maybe it's just I grew up, I went to a Catholic school, so there was a lot of kind of selflessness and service built into the rhetoric I was surrounded by. I really felt almost obligated to
Mm.
try and help these people. And I would volunteer at soup kitchens with my mom. We would make sandwiches and give them out on Market Street, and that still wouldn't feel like enough because I know,
Mhm.
okay, we make 500 sandwiches. There's a lot more than 500 people who need a sandwich in San Francisco. So I wanted to find a way to have a larger impact in that space at the ripe age of 12. So my mom kind of as a joke said, try and see if you can find an internship or a summer camp or whatever that's focused in
Sure.
civics and politics.
Great
So
advice. Yeah.
yeah, I get on the Mac, like the big desktop, that's what we had back then, and I'm looking for camps, and I find out quickly those don't exist. So then I'm looking for internships related to San Francisco government. And this role pops up and it says it's for students, and it does
Mm.
say in the job description that this is for college students, but all of the other requirements for the description: resident of the city and county of San Francisco, passionate about issues that impact their community, well written, willing to work long hours, background in research and essay writing. I'd written a few book reports, right? Like, how is that different from an essay? I knew how to do my APA citations, so I drafted up a resume. I had to first look up what a resume looks like, and then I made myself a resume. I think I used Comic Sans or some silly font, and then
Mhm.
I wrote up a cover letter talking about being a born and raised San Franciscan and seeing all these issues that impact not just my district, but the city at large. And I put my mother's phone number as the point of contact
Mm.
because I think I had a BlackBerry at the time or something that I didn't use too often. So I put her number down. And she let me know that I had been called to schedule an interview a
Wow.
couple of weeks later. So we schedule the interview. I show up to the office, and to be clear, this was then District 5 Supervisor London Breed's office. And I show up for the interview. I go to City Hall. I think I'd been in a few times for field trips with my class. I never actually entered the building on my own.
I
Gone through
love this.
security. I got these weird looks. I'm trying to figure out, like, looking at the little signs by the staircases, trying to figure out which one is Supervisor Breed's office. I get there. I'm sitting in the reception area at the front of the office, and the person in the computer looks at me and looks back at the computer and doesn't say anything. And 5 minutes goes by,
Mhm.
10 minutes goes by. I'm looking at the clock. It's been a few minutes since I'm supposed to be my interview is supposed to start.
Mhm.
Then 10 minutes after my interview is supposed to start, someone steps out from the office room, which is a separate room from the reception area, and sticks her head out and looks at me and goes, "Are you Ariana?" And I said, "Yes." She goes, "Oh my goodness. I'm Iris. I'm the legislative director. Just a heads up, this is a college level internship. So I don't really know where this conversation's gonna go." And I went, "Oh, well, it's okay." So we still had the conversation,
Well,
and
yeah, that's great.
yeah, we both were now aware that I was not someone that checked all of the boxes for the person who's supposed to be filling this
Right.
role. But as we had this conversation about the issues that plague not just District 5, but with respect to the city and the country at large, we realized, or at least she realized, that I had the passion and the drive to
Hmm.
be able to do this job. And the rest of the technical skills, those are relatively easily taught, especially
To
for someone who's
teachable. Yeah.
young and a
Yeah.
student. Exactly. But the passion, the true raw passion, that can't often be taught, right? That's something that's, I argue,
Exactly.
to a
Yep.
certain extent, it's innate. And she saw that passion that she was looking for, and she took a risk and said, "Well, we'll give you the job, right? You can start next week." So I was unpaid because I'm pretty sure you can't pay someone that young as for this role. I showed up 5 days a week. I had my badge. I'd come after school. And then in the summer, I came kind of full time. And it was a lot of kind of the mundane, menial office tasks, the going to the mailroom, going to get signatures for bills and for proclamations. But every now and then, again, the office room was separate from the reception area, but the door was usually open. So I would
Mm.
listen in on these conversations where the legislative team is sitting down with the supervisor talking about issues that sometimes would affect young San Franciscans. And they would either loop me in, or sometimes I would insert myself into the conversation and peek in and clarify something that, "Oh, that's not how board of elections town halls or board of education town halls work," right? My mom's
Hmm.
attended a few. It's a little bit different than that. And, "Oh, as a student in San Francisco, these are experiences that are, I think, bigger issues for kids than are the things that you're talking about in this bill." So there were very kind of sporadic moments where I had not just a look under a hood, but I was handed a tool to actually play a part in this discourse. And it's a bug that once you catch it, you can't get rid of it, right? Just seeing the issues in the community and then going to the office and being a part of the back end solution
Mm.
really is such a position of privilege. But also, once you have it, it is such an obligation to keep serving those communities as long as you have the capacity to do it. Just because, I mean, civics is only as strong as the legislators that are sitting in those offices, penning up the bills. And a bill, the strongest bills are the ones that have the most voices incorporated into the solution, right? Because policy is compromise, and the more you can involve perspectives and opinions, especially those hyper local ones and the super niche ones, the stronger the compromises that you're creating, right? The more people are
Hmm.
experiencing a net positive. So that was a very long-winded way of explaining the start of my career. So my focus, I transitioned from intern to city commissioner when the former supervisor became mayor of San Francisco. And I served as the chair of the civic engagement committee for 3 years. So my first term, I was 14 years old when I was sworn in, and I remained commissioner from sophomore through senior year of high school. And the only reason why I departed the commission was because for university, I moved out of state, so I was no longer a resident of the city and county of San
Ah,
Francisco. But at the time, my policy priorities were election security, youth involvement and civic engagement, and immigration issues in San Francisco. So at the time that I was serving as a commissioner, it was during the first Trump administration. So a lot of immigration related issues that San Francisco is dealing with for the first time. A lot of issues and concerns with civic engagement for young people, people feeling a lot more intimidated to participate politically than they had been in the past, showing young people different avenues that they can still participate, even though they are
hmm.
technically disenfranchised. And the work that I did that ended up resulting in my partnership with Speaker Pelosi's office was specific to voter pre-registration for 16 and 17-year-olds and the potential opportunity to explore local enfranchisement for 16 and 17-year-olds. So just for hyper local ballot measures, county, city level down, so not voting on the congressional or presidential elections by any means. But her
Sure,
team had
sure.
caught wind of that, and Proposition 1 or HR1 from 2019 was being introduced, which was the For the People Act, very election security focused version of HR1. And she wanted a young perspective to testify for the importance of election security. Someone who couldn't even vote. I was 16 at the time.
I mean, you're
And
as young as you can get, probably, that she could find, right?
seriously, I mean, I was barely pre-registered and they reached out to me. I was a tennis counselor out in Tahoe when I got the call, and they said, "Hey, we need you to come back to the city as soon as possible and give this speech to Speaker Pelosi's office." And they didn't tell
Wow.
me that there was not going to be a teleprompter. CNN, Fox, all of these big media outlets that I had been watching since I could barely walk were all going to be in the room. And I essentially had to memorize and give 5 minutes of remarks in front of, also at the time, Secretary of State Padilla, now Senator Padilla, was standing
Hmm.
beside me. Zoe Lofgren, Speaker Pelosi. I mean, these are all my political idols, and now people that I
Wow.
work with in a professional capacity. But it just, that moment was an inflection point, not just in my career, but in my life, realizing that I am not, by most people's definition, supposed to be it on
Hmm.
this panel, giving, especially because I can't vote, right? I'm not the person that should be giving these remarks. But what got me in the room wasn't some like incredible level of intelligence or some prodigy level skill or talent.
Hmm.
It was passion and just
Passion.
raw,
Mhm.
unadulterated interest that hadn't been squashed. The rose colored glasses were very much still on, right? Of, I can be a part of the solution for a problem
Yeah.
that I'm not even directly impacted by, right? So it's just about how much you care about the general welfare of your community. And your definition of community can be hyper local, it could be national. And I just really cared about helping people sleep better at night. And at the time I thought the avenue was through elections work. That's obviously since changed, right? Just given my current role with the
Mm.
American Red Cross. But everything I've done, every job opportunity I've had, every internship, every volunteer opportunity, I've done so knowing that in some way, most often thankless, it's helping people sleep better
I
at
love
night.
that. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's amazing. Well, what an amazing story. Thank you for sharing that. Kudos to your mom. Let's unpack that a little bit. I mean, what
Oh,
a
yeah.
great mom. And think about, I have two boys, and I think about my kids at that age. Golly, they were, playing video games, going to soccer matches. So, I mean, I guess it's similar, work. She's just taking you to the commissioner's office yeah, after
I did the
school.
video
So,
games and the sports too. I played
yeah,
competitive tennis growing up. My mother really is paramount in my story. Like, she should be the
yeah,
top line, not myself, just because she's
could,
a single parent in one of the most expensive cities in the world and never said no to me exploring an opportunity to engage with something I was interested in. And I think that's part of, again, the reason why, because I was never told no from an early age to have an opportunity
hmm
to be a part of something. I just had this kind of naive impression that people just aren't going to say no
hmm
to you being involved in something. I have since been told no dozens of times in my life, right? Maybe
sure.
hundreds, but it installed a level of drive in me that I don't think I would have had otherwise. And even with the sports, she made sure I had a very normal childhood as well, right? I was in the competitive sports, I was hanging out with my friends, and she worked full time this entire, I mean, well beyond a 9 to 5, but just made sure that I was in a position where there was nothing stopping me other than myself to do the things that I really wanted to do.
That's great. Great stuff. So, and I think that that's part of the story here for, the podcast that Limitless Living with Purpose and Joy is, I recently attended a workshop, a 3-day workshop, and I learned that, in our lifetime, it's important to stay curious. It's important to stay in that, for lack of a better word, a kindergarten stage where we can accept things and use that that naivety that you talked about of just going in with something, even if you don't know you don't have any of the answers. If it's something that you're drawn to, keep that curiosity going, no matter what stage of life you're in, from
Mhm.
12 like you all the way to 85. I mean, if you keep that level of curiosity and really passion, you can live a limitless life. I really believe that. So let's talk a little bit too about your story. What was it like? How did you handle? You must have had a little bit of fear, or maybe a little. Going into, you mentioned CNN and all the, standing next to Nancy Pelosi, and how did you at that young age manage that fear, face that fear head on, and really, because watching the video, hearing your story, doing the research for this, seeing you were poised. I encourage everyone to go check out your video online. It's you were a poised individual that knew exactly what they were there for, knew what to say. You didn't look like you had any fear whatsoever. So I'd love for our listeners to understand that, we all have that internal hurdle of fear. It's just how do you manage it? How do you tackle it? And I think if you could share your example, that would be a great for everyone to hear.
Sure. So I do want to clarify that in that video, I was petrified. I think that I put on a good front just because the cameras were rolling, but I, especially now that I work for the American Red Cross, I think of a lot of things in terms of disaster response. And my mother made a joke. She said, "Ariana, I think your brain is stronger than a Cat 5 tornado." Like I am a professional spiraler, right? If my brain gets caught on a cleavage of a potential fear or what if scenario, it just spirals down to the doomsday scenario. So at the time, again, I was 16. I was a incoming senior in high school. I got to a point, I think a few minutes before going on, that there was a green room that I was sitting in with Speaker Pelosi and her chief of staff and her comms team. And I was in the corner, literally alone, right? They're handling the speaker and her remarks, just sitting there staring down at the floor, thinking about what if the college counselors or the admissions advisors for the schools that I'm applying to are watching this, and then I go
Oh, no.
and just stumble on my words and embarrass myself, and they see my name when I apply for their school 4 months later and say, "Oh, this girl can't even hold her own for a 5-minute speech. So we don't we don't want her to." So it got that bad. So I realized that I was spiraling to a point where I can get very anxious. My vision was starting to fade a little bit. I found myself getting lightheaded. So I stopped myself. I did a couple of breathing exercises for about 30 seconds. And I I have a lot of internal dialogue with myself. I think that I obviously know myself
Mhm.
best. So the internal version of Ariana is my best friend and my confidant in those moments. And I asked myself, why are we here? Right? Obviously because Speaker Pelosi invited us,
Mm.
but why are we here? And I thought about the bill that I had been working on, right? The tens and thousands of young people in San Francisco that aren't here, but who I represent through my advocacy. These are young people, right? Just because they're not voters, some of them are taxpayers, some of them are primary caretakers, some of them are immigrants or the children of immigrants and come from middle or lower income backgrounds, and just the hurdles they've had to surmount in their lives with
Mhm.
no congressional representation or federal or local representation. Just because they're young doesn't make them
Mhm.
any less important of a citizen in their local, state, or federal democracy, right? So that
Mm.
was the entire kind of through line of my role and my kind of responsibility in the rooms that I was in, was that I am not an outlier. I think a lot of people speak about me and my career and say, you're one of one, or the decisions that you make and the way you speak, you're unique. And I keep having to articulate that what's unique about me is not how I speak or what I care about. It's that I kind of ignored the rules and did things my own way anyways. But when I got up on that podium and ended up speaking, I was not talking about issues that I just cared about. I was talking about issues that the tens of thousands of San Francisco young people that trusted me to serve as their youth commissioner, that they cared about. So
Mhm.
I that was the moment that calmed me down, was just remembering that this is not about me. right? The whole college counselor, whatever spiral that I went on, that was me thinking about myself and how I'm
Hmm.
going to be perceived after these 5 minutes. I need to be thinking about the young people who are constantly referred to as immature, as dumb, as, lazy. How I perform in these 5 minutes is going to either support that rhetoric or work to crumble it, right? So I thought about that, which initially added a little more pressure, but then I said, okay, it's go time. Pretend like you're watching yourself in third person. What would you want your youth representative to look like right now? Standing
Mm.
between the most powerful woman in American politics at the time and the future senator of California. So
Yeah.
I gave the remarks. I'll be honest, I kind of blacked out when I was
I bet.
talking,
Yeah.
and
Yep.
I stepped away from the podium. And Speaker Pidia had made a comment about not a leader of tomorrow, a leader of today. And that's kind of what brought me back when he said that. And then I looked down the panel and realized who I was standing next to and the platforms that had just aired what I had said. And I was hoping that I said everything right. And I've only watched it back once, and I compared it to my notes, and I did say everything I meant to say. But I think since then there have been a lot of moments that have been way more scary than that, especially in my work with the Red Cross, just because disasters are so unpredictable and they're
Hmm.
physically unsafe and they can change at the drop of a dime. But it's always the reminder of who I'm here to serve that
Yeah.
alleviates that fear, because those people need you to be at your best. You can feel the fear and the anxiety and the adrenaline
Hmm.
before and after. But when you're in response mode, when you're in game time, and maybe again, because I was an athlete growing up, there's the ability to switch that flip of we are here to do the task, to complete the action that helps these people sleep better at night, that promotes the general welfare, no matter what the issue area is. And we can deal with all the anxiety and the stress later tonight.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's great. I think that's. I thank you for sharing the way in which you manage that and handle that. I think it's really insightful, especially when we have to also remind ourselves that fear is an emotion that is not going to hurt us.
Yep.
It's an emotion that's a reaction, and I always tend to try to listen to my physical cues if I know that
Hmm.
there's if it's true fear or not. I mean, is it something I need to
Absolutely.
be afraid of, or is it just, as you say, get in your head and think about how you're going to be perceived? So, but thank you for sharing that. You mentioned that your work and at the Red Cross. Can you share a little bit about what it is that you do each and every day? How you've parlayed all that experience as your youth to your now adult life?
Absolutely. So when I left San Francisco, I moved to Washington, D.C. for my undergraduate studies. I attended Georgetown. And for the first few years, my work continued to focus on election security. Actually, up until my senior year, I was still working on an election security task force. My work was focused on both foreign and domestic interference,
Hmm.
on U.S. elections at large. And my whole intent moving from San Francisco to D.C. was, again, this through line of how can I help as many people as possible. And I just, again, the naivete we mentioned earlier, I assumed that what better way to expand your impact than going from hyper local to nationwide? Let's just say the rose colored glasses were smacked off of my face pretty quickly moving to DC and working on the Hill with electeds and
Hmm.
working with these think tank organizations. I realized very quickly that the red tape at the federal level and just the bureaucracy, and again, this whole idea of this is the SOP we've followed for now 250 years, this is how we do things. If it slows down mission delivery or mission impact, so be it. We have to follow the rules. It created a lot more frustration than I liked, right? Working a year and a half on one bill just for it to get tabled and for that to be considered a win. I didn't like that feeling, and I immediately would think
Yeah.
back to the
Mm.
dozens of bills that I handheld from authorship to implementation in San
Hmm.
Francisco, and just
Hmm.
thought, I need to be back in the field, right? I need to be in a position that I don't necessarily need to work for the government, but I would like to work with electeds and with their staff, but more closely with the communities, right? And I think especially in the past 2 or 3 years, we've seen a shift from kind of top-down governance to, at least on a community level, a preference for bottom up. Those hyper local agencies and nonprofits that you
I
trust,
see.
and then the
Yeah.
hyper local electeds that you know personally, and then maybe state level, but that's kind of it, right? In terms of who you trust to open your doors to. I was looking to be in that position of trust again. So I ended up walking away from the opportunity to stay in Washington, D.C., in arguably one of the worst job environments for entry level hires ever. I did a little bit of the like backpacking quarter life crisis trip in Japan. And then I came back to San Francisco. And again, San Francisco, not a lot of opportunity for government poli-sci related folks
Mm-hmm.
unless I wanted to go back to City Hall, which again, I wasn't necessarily looking to work for the government, even on a municipal level. And then I thought back to a brief opportunity I had to work with the Red Cross through my exchange program. I did some
Mm.
international humanitarian law work, and we gave a
Love it.
presentation at the UN, and then we did a bit of an IHL tour across Geneva. And one of our stops was at the International Federation of the Red Cross's headquarters.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd encountered the Red Cross at a high school blood drive, and obviously I knew about their disaster response portfolio, but that was about it. And just seeing the not just depth, but breadth of work that the Red Cross did
Yeah, it's
across
amazing.
all of its different chapters and agencies globally, and going to the portion that focused specifically on the American Red Cross, and realizing in that moment that the Red Cross in my city and my chapter in my region did a lot more than I realized it did, was eye-opening. And I remember kind of putting a pin in that in my head and thinking, okay, I'm going to look into this later, and just not
Mm-hmm.
having the time. And then when I started my job search, I kid you not, I opened LinkedIn, and that day a role had been posted. American Red Cross, California Government Relations. And I read the job description, and it felt like reading the job description for that City Hall
I
internship,
love
where
that.
they were looking for someone who had a lot more years of experience than I had. But other than that age or years of experience requirement, everything else was just
Mm.
California native, work with California electeds, interest in these policy areas, background in policy writing. All the boxes were checked. The only prohibitive factor was my age. And I thought,
Sounds familiar.
yeah, screw it.
Sounds
I've done this
familiar.
before. Yeah, I can
It
do it
sounds like
again.
12 years when you were
Yep.
12 years old.
Oh yes. And I knew obviously the threshold's a little bit different, right? This is a paid employment opportunity, and
Sure.
in a really bad job market, they're going to get a lot of senior level applicants as well. But, let's
Yeah,
just go
don't
for it,
compare
right?
yourself to what you think's out there, right? I
Exactly.
mean, you
And
you dove
the
right in and applied. So,
and the worst case is you get told no, or you get ghosted,
right.
like I think
I
everyone
mean,
does in these
that's the
jobs. Yeah.
lesson here today is like just if you have a passion for something, go for it. So,
Yep.
I love your story and I really appreciate you telling it. It's been great hearing it, and the passion comes through and through with your story, and I'm so excited you're with the American Red Cross. It's a passion for me. I love the American Red Cross. So, congratulations on really taking your experience and helping those so many that need it. With the American Red Cross services. So thank you, and
Absolutely.
thank you for being here today, and
Of
being such a
course.
bright light in the world of public service. And to everyone listening, just stop waiting for permission. The worst thing that they can say is, as you said, Arianna, is no. And you're at the same place where if you didn't try, you wouldn't get where you want to go. So, use Ariana's story to really think about your situation. If you want to change it, I say go for it, make those changes. And if Ariana's story, gives you a boost of courage today, please subscribe and share this episode with your friends and colleagues. And don't forget to visit Limitless Living with Purpose and Joy. I'll put that article from the website link up so you can learn more about Ariana's story, and for more resources and updates about this program. So again, thank you, Arianna, for joining me today. This was fantastic. Really appreciate you taking the time. It means a lot to me that you share your story and spend some time with me today.
Absolutely. Totally appreciate it. I hope some of this resonates with folks, and I really appreciate the opportunity to be here today.
Great. Well, thank you again. I'm Trace King, and let's live limitless, and we will see you on the next episode. Thank you so much. Take care.
Thanks for listening to Limitless Living with Purpose and Joy. Subscribe and follow. New episodes are released every Wednesday. Find the show on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Amazon, or wherever you get your podcasts. Visit limitlesslivingwithpurposeandjoy.com for show notes.